Welcome back. Today we are talking with Charlie Maclean-Bristol about future risks. Charlie, great first segment there. I'd like to just head back to the climate change thing. There's a lot of strong weather events happening right now too. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think in the UK at the moment we've got flooding in various parts of the UK, and I just, always like to be dead up to date on this. And I put on my BBC news this morning, and the headline item was wildfires in Los Angeles suburbs, and I think climate change is an interesting one for business continuity practitioners. Let's not go into the debate of whether it exists or not, whether it not. But I think the point is there seems to be more extreme weather events than we've ever got before. I was just doing some work in Aruba, and they haven't had a hurricane. They don't really have hurricanes. So they're in the Caribbean. They don't really have hurricanes. But we're working on the principle, say, just because we didn't have a hurricane in the past, didn't mean we don't have hurricanes now. They had the earliest hurricane ever in the Caribbean this year from the Atlantic hurricane.
Mm.
But I think with climate change, we are going to get more extreme weather events. And we've seen that with the wildfires there. We've seen that with the hurricanes in the Caribbean. We've seen that with some of these sort of heat dome events. Alex, you were talking about your minus 22 outside. And I don't know if that
Yes,
is
right
a
now.
standard event for you, if that's just what you know and love, or whether that's more extreme. We do get extreme weather anyway. But I do think, and I think one of the things where I think the Texas ice storms, a couple of years ago, last year, was a really good example is, Texas, you think of cowboy fields, you think of cactuses. That's what you think of. You don't expect snow and ice. And I don't think Texas expected snow and ice. So you have the Texas ice storms, take down the power line. And I think one of the issues for Texas is that their power grid wasn't connected to other states. So when they lost their lines and lost their pylons, they weren't able to import power from other places because that was not the way their grid was configured, because of their kind of planning and their risk management say, well, we don't need to do that, or for other reasons they didn't do it. And I think with climate change, we're going to get more extreme events. And I think the whole point about it was just because you didn't have an event in the past doesn't mean you had an event in the future. The whole of insurance and the whole of sort of risk management is predicated on previous events. What is the possibility of this flood happening? We know it happens once 100 years, so we can configure our insurance round about it there. And then we find we get three 100-year events 3 years running.
Yeah.
And so I think for again coming at up from a sort of business continuity crisis management point of view, just because we haven't had the incident in the past doesn't mean we're not going to have it now. And so I think we have to look at a wider scope of the incidents and say, well, look, we live in a place here that's quite rainy, so actually we live in a place that doesn't flood, but actually we're maybe more likely to flood in the future, or we're more likely to have power cuts because of the weather. So I think we have to kind of take our assumptions and have to kind of expand them and go and say, if it's a 10% chance, well, is it a 10% chance, or is it actually, if it can happen, we almost need to prepare for it. I know there is a danger of trying to prepare for every single event there are, because the next event is the one you haven't thought about. But I think with climate change, we just have to be aware that what happened in the past may not be happening in the future.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go to risk number 3, complexity and close coupling. What did you mean by that?
Nah, this is a good one. I like this one. Right. What we do is we build systems. Either internally, we build our IT system, and this is, or we do it as nations or transport systems, whatever. We build a system, and we build another system, and then we build a system that connects to it, and then the guy, or usually a guy, but women these days, we then connect into new systems. that person leaves, retires. We build another system, we'll integrate it with that. We stick a bit of AI in here. We stick a bit of this integration here. And we produce systems and we layer them on top of each other. So we don't often sort of say, throw everything out and we rebuild the business. We layer all these systems on top of each other. And nobody has an idea of what these systems are. No one has an overview of them. Everybody knows a little bit of them.
Mhm.
And what we have then is this, bit sometimes like the Swiss raised on Swiss cheese model, where we have certain things line up and we have an incident and it is something that nobody considered. Look at the CrowdStrike thing. You know, that was a few lines of code, and we're all told to, you've got to patch like mad, you've got to put the patch in quickly. The patch was from Microsoft. They're, reasonably good guys at patching. It was probably tested, and then 11 million machines worldwide get taken out, and you get the blue screen of death. And it wasn't catastrophic for most organization, but it just took out a lot of machines worldwide, and caused lots of issues. Who's preparing for that? Whose job was it to make sure that didn't happen? You get taught to patch and then it gets taken out there. We had a air traffic control system a couple of years ago working. It works with computers because you can't manually do it. And they fed in one particular line of new flight details, and it was a fairly standard flight details. That was enough to crash the system. That crashed the system, and it took them 7 or 8 hours to recover. At the same time, they're manually trying to do all the planes there. They're having to shut down planes, say you can't take off because we can't manually control them. And another example of this sort of close coupling of systems that nobody really understands, and we put inputs into them, and they react within the system, which people don't know. And my understanding with the NATS one, it wasn't a particularly different or something complex or something new. It was just a particular flaw within the system that one that was put in was enough to crash it.
Mm-hmm. We had
And
that. We had the same kind of thing happen here in Canada. I don't know. You heard of the Rogers outage 2.5, 2 years ago, where it was just simply a change that wasn't quite done correctly. That's what it came down to. People issue. It just wasn't quite done correctly, and it brought down the entire Rogers network across Canada, so people couldn't watch TV, no internet, or cell phones. Communications were down all over the place, and that was for people, organizations,
yeah, I do remember
communities.
that. Yeah.
I was hit. I had no idea what was going on, and I couldn't get updates anywhere because I had Rogers. So I was stuck. Like, what's happening?
Yeah. You look out the window and check, is the world ending? No, there's
Yeah,
still people out there shopping.
exactly.
So it's obviously not Armageddon, not a nuclear explosion. But yeah, I do think that there is these complexities in the systems that, and it's not just, you have your own internal systems, but then, more and more we're reliant on outsource and third parties. And we're reliant on Microsoft, we're reliant on Amazon databases, data centers, we're relying on lots of external people, and they can cause problems on us. We can have bugs within our system which just collapse, and I don't think there's anything we can do about it. I think again we just accept these things happen, and we can make sure that we do all our checks, and we test and we make sure the patches work before we stick them out and all that sort of stuff. But in the end, these things will collapse, and we just have to admit to say they will collapse. And again, we need to have our resilience. We need to have, we need to be able to react and to be able to deal with them.
And you think that's what's driving the supply chain resilience methodologies and focus right now is because of some of these events?
Yeah, I think the supply chains. Well, I think we know we're very dependent upon supply chain and manage outsourced services as well. And the world gets more and more specialist. It was quite interesting today. This was a couple of years ago. I went to a data center. I know they were getting a tour around. There was a couple of ladies doing stuff in the corner there, and said, "Oh, they're the cleaners." And the lady said, "No, we're not cleaners. We are specialist data center cleaners." And there's a whole science to do with how to clean data centers. You don't just get your mop out and you give it a quick dust with a duster. No, it's actually quite a highly skilled. It's a highly skilled job. And I just thought, how niche is the world? We outsource it to data center cleaners because the people who do that need to be highly skilled. We don't employ our people because it takes tons of times, and I think, as we outsource things, we lose the skills and knowledge to do it ourselves as well. So we absolutely rely on that supplier. And if they go down, we go down with them. Yeah. And often across industries, there was a case, I can't remember the organization that did lawyers' case files. And they did this for lots and lots of lawyers' company. And they had a cyber attack, so all the lawyers couldn't get hold of all their case files because they were all stored on this organization's data centers, and it caused massive disruption of the lawyers, a lot of conveyancing stuff and house buying. So it had a public effect in as well, not just the business effect. But they went to the best company that did it. They did it for lots of other people, so why not pile in there? They're specialists. They got all the systems there, and then they're absolutely reliant on them. They can't conveyance a house because actually the third party's down. So there is no company that just lives in a bubble which does everything itself end to end. We all rely on people. So again, these incidents are going to happen, and I think we just had to ride them and deal with them.
Yeah. We got 4 minutes left in our second segment, but I want to get started on something you just referenced, cyber threats.
Yeah. I think cyber threats is an interesting threat. Is an interesting new threat because quite a lot of these things. The Russian hybrid warfare is a deliberate act, but sometimes climate change or some of the geopolitical bits, there's not one person commanding it. It is a whole load of factors. Climate change, factors beyond our control, complexity, close-line factors beyond our control. But cyber attacks on the whole are deliberate attacks on our organization done by humans, and the human is making a decision: I am going to destroy that organization, or I'm going to extort that organization, or I'm going to release their data, causing massive amounts of damage to organizations. And this is a threat that we haven't really that much, as far as I can see, in sort of business had it. It is almost like someone going, it was 30 years ago, someone going around random shops and buildings and firebombing them, burning their buildings down, or burning their shops down and burning their factories down. Yeah, of course that does happen. You get some mafioso extortion, but it's never been on such a wide scale and never been so damaged, I think in history so far. So cyber threat is a deliberate attack, and with a deliberate attack, it is somewhat maybe in our power to do something about it. Whereas climate change is more difficult because some of the power there is, a hurricane we can't stop. We can prepare, we can make sure we got our building codes, but we can't really do an awful lot. With cyber, we can.
Do you have any thoughts about sometimes with these? I was just in the conversation yesterday. An organization has an incident response team or a crisis management team. They call them something different, but then they're completely different with cyber. And sometimes the two just have conflicting priorities. They don't talk to each other, and it causes confusion. Do you have any thoughts on how to bring that together because a response is a response.
Yeah,
Cyber
I
and
think
earthquake are just triggers.
yes, I've seen this in quite a few places where often you'll have a crisis management structure done by a business continuity manager or something with a crisis team, and then you've got some business continuity plans, some tactical operational plans, and we have quite a nice structure. And then maybe over the last five years or so, they've said cyber is the big thing. We really need to come in and sort out our cyber. We're ill prepared. We don't know what we're doing. So let's get the heavy duty consultants in there. We'll get the heavy duty consultants in there, and they'll do all the kind of end protection and all that kind of techie stuff. But as part of that package, they will always sell the incident management bit. Now, the kind of more lazy consultants, and that can be big and small, will go and say, right, we'll write you a crisis management plan for cyber. So they'll go and get a crisis management plan, and have a couple of executives, and they'll have a couple of techie people, and they'll do a kind of cyber incident response team. And what they haven't done is taken they haven't bothered to say, what have you got in place already? And can we use that existing infrastructure with some tweaks and actually say, well, look, our cyber incident response team, let's keep that totally techie, and let's actually have then the crisis management team, which does the communications, the reputational management, the continuity of operations, and keep that existing team, which does that anyway, but we need to upskill them, or they might need extra additional people for dealing with a cyber incident as opposed to a natural disaster or one of those sort of things. So I think it is this balance between. So that is in poor organizations, they do that. And I have seen that there. More enlightened organizations, when they're doing it, they have their computer incident response team. And we do a lot of work in training senior managers in the kind of reputational management. How do you deal with the ransom note? What is different about cyber incidents to other incidents they might have planned for or dealt with in the past? So yours is a great point there. It does happen in some organizations, yeah.
Great. I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly what I told them. I'm glad to hear that from you.
Yeah.
On that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. We're talking with Charlie Maclean-Bristol today about future risks, and we will be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.